Carol, I have been up since 4:30 a.m. Guess why?
Why?
Masha was yowling like crazy.
Good grief. What has gotten into that little kitty cat?
Well, she had a mouse trapped beneath a chair and she couldn't reach it because it was just far enough in her little paw couldn't get there. So I helped her flush it out, and that's all we'll say about that.
Your big paw could help get it out, and
That's right.
gosh.
Bye-bye, Mousy.
Bye-bye, Mousy. But
Welcome.
hello.
Welcome to the Garden Angelus, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on 7.5 acres out in the country. It's about 1.5 acres.
And I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about 1/3 of an acre.
We call ourselves Garden Angelus because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening, and we want you to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Time for another episode. Hello, Dee.
Hello, Carol. How does your garden grow?
My garden grows chilly.
Yeah, me too. It's been very chilly in the mornings, especially. Wasn't it 29 this morning at your house?
Yes. When you texted me and I texted back and says 29 degrees, but now it is 41 degrees.
It's 50 here. So we're finally rising, but boy, we were at 39. Anyway,
that is cold for you.
It is really too cold for this time of year, but one more week, people. All right. What did you do this week?
So I did some weeding and I did some cutback of some perennials and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I play a little, it's like a little game. So the trash man comes Thursday, mid to late morning. Mm-hmm. So I go out Thursday and figure out how much can I get into a trash bag to send out with the trash man. I could do it on Wednesday at a leisurely pace, but I find myself going out Thursday mornings. I don't know why.
You probably work faster that way.
I guess. So I have to listen for the trash truck to be coming around. I planted out some onion sets, which are the little bulbs, and I put out a bunch of onion seedlings because I grew them for a family handyman article. Mm-hmm. And they actually look pretty good.
They do look good. I now grow all of mine from seed ever since Matt Mattis said that was the way to do it. And you know what? I've been really pleased with the results, and it's cheap. It is cheap. Anyway,
in fact, I'm going to direct sow some seeds probably next week in the garden.
Mm-hmm. You'll have green onions by fall, which is what we should tell people. Because if I did this last year, I forgot to sow mine indoors. So I just sowed them out in the garden. And by August, it might have even been July, I started getting full grown, spring onions, what they call spring onions.
I think that would be July.
It was great.
So it's because it's so chilly now. there's a lot of things that are on hold here. Mm-hmm. Because it is so chilly and the extended forecast is still chilly. So tomatoes and peppers do not belong outside. They belong inside. You can put them out during the day when it gets up into I like it to be at least in the 60s before I put them out for the day.
I would put them out in the 50s. And the truth is I've already planted mine and people are all gasping now. But what I noticed, because it got down to about 36 in my garden a couple of days ago.
That is chilly.
That is chilly. But here's what I noticed. I grow mine on an asphalt driveway in pots.
Yes.
And I also shelter them somewhat in the pots because I don't put the dirt all the way to the top because they're going to get big. And you know what happened? I haven't had any stunting. I haven't had any frost damage on them. And I know I had frost because I saw it on a few things out there.
The microclimate you've created, all that heat gets absorbed all day by that driveway. And then at night it gets released. So it is not that cold right there.
Right. In that one spot. I'm not telling people that was the best idea. It's just, we were supposed to be done. And then we had this little cold front come through. All right. And then you said something about you were answering a bunch of texts.
Yeah, my youngest sister, she's really into the gardening. And I'm like, you are a bright woman. You have these questions for me? So she went all by herself to the greenhouse on Saturday because I got new couches. So I gave my old couches to my nephew. So we were moving those on Saturday. We, as in I stand there, and he and his brother loaded them in the truck.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, she actually calls her youngest son, who's firing questions at me that she's asking him. I'm like, she could have just called me. But anyway,
That's funny.
She doesn't go to the greenhouse by herself, and she went all by herself. So I'm gonna have to circle back and talk to the people at the greenhouse, see how she did.
Oh, wow. Wouldn't you know, you're going to go and test her. Gosh, that's terrible.
So what was your garden? We know that your tomatoes have had some challenging conditions, but they are thriving.
They're doing
what
fine.
else is going on?
I got the rest of them in because I had to get a few more pots. I'm still looking for shishito peppers. So if anybody out there knows where there are some, last year they had them at the box store, but maybe they didn't sell very well. They were in that Bonnie Plant Foodie Fresh thing. I haven't been able to find them. I forgot to start shishitos, which I'm really kind of sad about. Maybe my friend Karen has some. Karen, do you have any shishitos? I will trade you something for them. Anyway, I transplanted almost everything that is in the greenhouse, and I'm still working on it because I've kept the Suncoleus indoors because it's been too cold for it. And, but most everything is out there now. The zinnias, the cosmos that I started from seed, some of which work better than others. And I've also, hey, I haven't gotten those Van Gogh seeds yet from you. I know you've sent them in the mail.
I sent them in the mail.
I bet they come today. I was just going to ask. I bet they come today.
So.
I hope so because I've got a space for them. I'm ready. And then I planted some other sunflower seeds. And then just now I found in my drawer some seeds for, oh, sorry. I know that's noisy. Oklahoma pink. Oh, that doesn't look good. It looks like a mouse chewed into the Oklahoma pink. Oklahoma pink in here.
Is that a zinnia?
Yes, and I might have to plant it. By the way, I just want to give a shout out to my Cheyenne Spirit echinaceas.
Okay.
I started those indoors. I had tons of them. Tons. I gave some away. I kept some. I put them in different places. I'm kind of excited about that. So that's what I've been doing. Let's see, what else did I say in here? That's it. Oh, I'm in love with my Bloody Mary nasturtiums. You saw them on.
I saw you posted on Instagram. They are very pretty. I guess I've heard of them. I don't know.
I've never heard of that variety before. And I got them at Baker Creek and they did really well, which by the way, I also bought some violas at Baker Creek that had unusual colors. They couldn't handle the heat. They are not heat resistant at all.
I was surprised with your Bloody Mary nasturtiums. You started those inside in the greenhouse?
Yes.
Okay. Because here I direct sow them once we're frost free, and then they kind of struggle along all summer. By fall, though, they are just kicking out the blooms and growing wildly.
This is a good example of how different our climates can be, because they will not last all summer here. I have to use them as a spring crop, and I have planted them out direct sow, but a lot of times it's really hard to navigate that temperature thing where they don't get frozen, but they also have cool enough weather. So I started them indoors the last 2 years, and I'm really glad I have, and they've done really well. And they'll do really well until end of June, and then they poop out. So I don't have them into the fall. And the same thing with my pansies. They'll be done too. Hey, did you plant out your snapdragons yet?
No, I haven't. I've been tempted to, because those and also the petunias, they're kind of in the same strip of pots. Yeah. I think they both could go out, and I'm thinking I should. I think I'm going to take the snapdragons. We'll talk about that. I think I may put those out.
Goodness, the snapdragons are. I planted mine out finally. I put all the orange ones in my garage border, and I put the purple orchid ones in my kitchen border, so I could really keep an eye on them and make sure they get enough water, because snapdragons are weird. Okay, that's it. Ooh,
I'm going to do a quote and get us going on our flower topic. Speaking of things that we can't grow. April hath put a spirit of hope in everything. William Shakespeare. And we have to get our April quotes in because, there's only a week left of April.
Yeah, there's not
Believe it or not.
Left.
Believe it or not.
I like that it says hath put a spirit of hope in everything. Because if you want to grow delphiniums,
You're going to need a lot of
Lot
hope
of
in our
hope.
climates. And that is our
Yeah.
flower, delphiniums. So my favorite quote about delphiniums comes from, I think the book is called Tell About Night Flowers, which is Eudora Welty. It's a book of a bunch of her letters. And she wrote, and I should have looked it up on a blog post that I wrote. So it is. The delphiniums I planted in my ignorance have all bloomed like everything and are getting ready to bloom for the second time. And Mother says the ladies of the garden club come over each day to worship and grit their teeth. Because delphiniums should not grow in Jackson, Mississippi, where Eudora Welty lived.
No,
It's too hot.
she must have had a microclimate, and it must have been like she started them in the house and then set them out in fall. I can't figure it out. She either started them early and set them out early in spring and they didn't freeze, because it is Jackson. So it is really, really south. I don't know. They're in the ranuncula family. I'm not doing that. Ranunculaceae.
The Ranunculaceae family, which includes hellebores, clematis, columbine, and anemones, or windflowers, as we call them.
Grecian windflowers.
All kinds of beautiful flowers. But it's that delphinium with that big, tall spike of blue flowers that gives you that classic English cottage garden look.
And I sent you pictures of them from a guy's garden in England. And I was
We're
like,
going to put those on the newsletter.
Those delphiniums, even in England, those were exceptional. But that guy was one heck of a gardener.
Did you grit your teeth when you saw him?
No, I was just in amazement. I stood there and I thought, this is what delphiniums are supposed to look like.
So they like moist but not wet soil. And they like it to be cool. So they said good morning sun and dappled afternoon shade. They don't like it hot. So I looked up in Noel Kingsbury's book that we're fascinated with, The Story of Flowers, How They Change the Way We Live. Delphiniums are in that book.
I'm sure.
So he talks about they are the true blues, which is rare in flowers.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what he says about the climate they like. Supposedly, they grow rapidly during long summer days. And indeed, it is said that the very best place to grow them is just north of the Arctic Circle. Say.
The reason I think they work in England is, usually its summers aren't too hot. Although last summer when I was there, wasn't it last summer that I went with them? Gosh, it was hot there that day and all their gardens were burning up. The summer I saw the delphiniums was, I think, 2017. It was a good summer, but they have very long days in the summer.
Yes, they do.
The sun doesn't set in Great Britain. Well, in England, the British Isles, it doesn't set until about 11 or 11:30 at night. And if you've ever tried to sleep, you would know. So I think that's why it works. And their sun isn't as intense as ours, stuff like that. They don't have a continental climate. They have a maritime climate, blah, blah, blah. Lucky them.
So the other thing we should know about delphiniums is if you manage to successfully grow them. And I think I'm going to hear from our friend over in Ohio. I think she successfully grows them.
Somebody will say something. Yeah.
Somebody's going to give us some tips. But the one tip is the stems are hollow. So this is one that you need to find a discreet way of staking them. Otherwise, a big windstorm will come up and just knock them down at their height.
Snap them right off. Right.
Yeah. So that's a problem. And so for us, they're also considered short-lived perennials. And I think there's short-lived perennials in England too.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. So the variety that you're talking about here is Pacific Giants blend. Well, that's because it's a maritime climate, Pacific Giants.
Yes. Zones 3 to 7.
Yeah, I call BS on our zone 7. They won't grow here. They sell a variety of delphinium at Ace Hardware every year in the spring. And it's already up and it's a little transplant and you can transplant it. And I did it one year just for fun.
How did it work?
And it worked great until they were done blooming. And then as soon as it got hot, they were done blooming. I did them in the shade and they were electric blue. They were really pretty. There's not very much that is electric blue in the garden.
No, and I think that they do like the edge of a woodland where they would be on the side where they would get the morning sun,
East.
and then the woodland would kind of the east side. Then the woodland would shade them for the rest of the day, and they would get a little bit. They don't want to be in a swamp, but don't let them dry out, they say.
Yeah, I had them in an area that had clay underneath. I mean, it worked fine for just a little bit, but people were like coming up to me and being all excited. I was on tour, and I just did it for fun. And people were like, "How did you do it?" And I was like, literally just put them in the ground. I did not really grow them. They're just for fun.
Well, the other thing that Noel Kingsbury said, that they were the height of popularity when people had staffs of many gardeners and they could fuss over them. And I think if you think this is a plant it and forget it perennial, no. This is a plant it, fuss over it,
stake it,
get it to bloom so that people from your garden club will come over and grit their teeth.
Right. And I didn't plant them for gritting teeth, but people were like, "How did you do that?"
But people did.
Well, they definitely wanted to know how I did it. So I was like, I didn't. All right. You ready for the next one?
Well, I want to say, if we have listeners who are growing delphiniums successfully in climates like Carol and Dee's, we don't want to hear from you in the Pacific Northwest. We don't want to hear from you in England. Please let us know some of your secrets, and we might be able to talk about them.
I'll hear from you in England if you if you tell me that it's harder than it looks, even there.
Okay.
Ready?
I am.
Spring work is going on with joyful enthusiasm. John Muir. I would say that is true of both of us right now.
That is mostly true. I mean, it's a little bit chilly, but once you get out there and start working, because I always remember 57 degrees Fahrenheit is supposed to be the ideal temperature for working outside.
Is it?
That's what I read somewhere. Huh. So it has to be true.
Must be. So you had this idea, and it was a good one. We should talk about the appeal of heritage vegetables. And we both watched Gardener's World over the weekend. And there was a big section on a lady who grows heirloom vegetables.
Yes.
Remember the tomato that was in sections that you could give to a child?
Yes.
I thought that was clever.
I have grown that tomato.
I don't remember what the variety was, but it was a very interesting tomato.
It has a tongue twisting German name to it, but it is interesting because the tomato has all those little segments, and you literally can just
peel them apart.
Take them off. And they said it had the appeal for working men to take it in their lunchbox because they could just peel apart and eat the pieces.
That's a great idea because it wouldn't be messy either.
When it comes to heirlooms and stuff, tomatoes are the big deal.
They are. And I would say peppers are getting there too. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I have 2 books on my bookshelf. I wrote them down here. I have 2 books on my bookshelf about heirloom tomatoes.
So generally, heritage or heirloom vegetables are open pollinated because, well, hybrids won't come back true. So seed can be saved and passed from one gardener to the next. And they can also, and I'm sure you wrote this down in here somewhere, but I'm going to accidentally say it beforehand. One of the great appeals to them is that if you grow something in your own garden or in the South for a while or wherever it is you live, and you harvest seed from that for several years in a row, you are going to get a vegetable that is adapted to your climate.
You are.
That's why in India, the thing about the corn, when they brought in American corn that was GMO, it didn't do well in India. Unfortunately, it cross-pollinated with some of the Indian corn, but that was a big deal because in India, they use a lot of corn just like they do in Mexico. And so they had adapted varieties of corn to grow in their very difficult climates. That's just an example.
Yeah. That is an example. And so when we say open pollinated, you can sometimes pollute your heirloom strain if you're growing other varieties too close to it.
Yeah.
So you have to be kind of careful about that.
And that's kind of complicated because if you're saving seeds for tomatoes or whatever, you don't want to do them like I do and grow them all down the row in the center of your driveway next to each other if you're going to save the seed.
Yes, that is true. But it is. And I think that a lot of the heirloom vegetable growers, like from our generations past, let's face it, your grandmother, my grandmother, they weren't growing 12, 15 varieties of tomatoes.
No,
They were growing
two.
one
Or two.
two at most. I was thinking about my aunt. She grows celebrity tomatoes. That's it.
Well, and
She just needs 6 celebrity tomato plants and she is good to go.
She is set. My least favorite.
She is set.
My least favorite tomato in the world is Celebrity, by the way. I don't like Early Girl either. Isn't Celebrity a hybrid? I think it is.
It is. It is a hybrid, but that's the variety that she likes to grow.
And I was thinking about that with my grandmother. My grandmother, who was a heck of a gardener, Grandma Nita, she really loved hybrids because she loved the disease resistance and she loved the uniformity of the plant and the fact that they were determinate and that they just produced all their tomatoes at once because she was going to can with them. So different gardeners have different things that they want. But back to open pollinated heritage vegetables.
And then I was thinking about heritage vegetables. The other context would be like when you go to Italy, you think of, okay, they're growing lots of tomatoes, lots of eggplant, lots of basil. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about my German heritage, where I'm thinking, oh, they must have been growing a lot of cabbage because of the sauerkraut. And cabbage would be something that would grow very well in Germany, which has a cooler summer than here.
And cucumbers for pickles.
Mm-hmm. And then I was thinking about, I have a lot of Scottish heritage. I don't know if you do.
I don't.
That probably makes me stubborn. Oh. I shouldn't say that. That's probably not polite to say, but
that you're stubborn.
Anyway, lots of root crops. I think of Scotland, like turnips and carrots and things.
Cold weather and root crops. Yeah, for sure. And things that hold over well in the wintertime. Same thing in Germany, too. They would have also grown turnips and carrots, which were very popular in my family background also because of the German heritage. And then British, you brought up peas. Yes, mushy peas are a big deal, as are lettuce. I mean, there's all the cold things and all the coal crops. They grow all those. Monty Don is always growing those.
Yes. And then, of course, the Mexican vegetable crops, we think of all the hot peppers, although you want a shishito pepper, which is more Asian.
I want a shishito pepper because I've already got my Mexican peppers. I've already got Anaheim and I've got poblano. They're already planted. They're ready to go. But I also think of corn, tomatoes, cilantro, basically, and onions, things that you can grow that make salsa, for example, but lots of other things too.
They like the heat.
That like the heat and can handle. Sometimes in Mexico, it's mountainous. So some of their stuff has to be able to handle cool nights and really hot, sunny days. So they have adapted a lot of crops and also low water because they still do a lot of diverted watering, where they have canals and they divert the water into their fields. Fascinating stuff. And then you said we should talk about Ireland because of potatoes. Yes.
You know where else potatoes are really popular and there's a lot of heritage or heirloom varieties?
Where?
Peru.
Oh, yeah, that's true. And they're totally different types of potatoes than what would grow in cold areas.
That's where I think of blue potatoes.
Yes, and I don't like blue potatoes. That's all I'm going to say about that.
We've talked about that.
And then you said, shall we talk about terroir, which we've talked about before. And terroir, I think, is fascinating that we now apply it to vegetable growing, not just winemaking.
Yes. And it's where the environmental factors of that particular region impact the plant's growth and also its taste. And so I always think of the San Marzano tomatoes that to be put in a can and labeled San Marzano.
They have to be grown there.
Must be grown in that region in Italy. You can't just get the variety. Mm-hmm. That's a big no-no.
Even though they sell a San Marzano tomato, the plant that you can buy and seeds that you can buy, it's not technically a San Marzano tomato unless it's grown in that area. And one of the reasons that's so important, because I watched that show that Stanley Tucci did, it's because of the volcanic soil. And their tomatoes really are good. Italian tomatoes from San Marzano are really something. So there you go.
That is very good. And I have a note way down below, but I actually wrote an article about what are heirloom seeds for Family Handyman. We'll link to that.
Okay, cool. And then we also thought we should talk just quickly again, because we brought this up before, that certain peppers are also known by the area they're grown. Anaheim is a great example because a big gem pepper, which comes out of New Mexico and is hard to find unless you're in New Mexico. One of the best Anaheim type of peppers, but it can only be called a big gem when it's grown over there. And same thing with, there's another famous pepper that's grown in that area too. So,
well, I'll give you an example from Indiana.
Okay.
The Decker melon, which is a cantaloupe.
Mm-hmm.
The only place to get a Decker melon is one that's grown around Decker, Indiana. Yeah. It doesn't count as Decker if it's not from that region, period. And don't call it that otherwise. Right.
And I think, there's some of that's pride of place because people have worked very hard to make those soils good to grow the Decker melon or the Anaheim pepper. But also it's the type of soil it is. And a whole region grows up around a certain area. For example, I have these beans that I made the other night that are called Santa Maria Piquinto. Okay. Small. They're a small pink bean. They can only be grown in that part of California. And they're so well known that Santa Maria County not only has those beans, but it's a whole barbecue that the ranchers used to do. And I made it on Friday night. And it was fabulous. You make tri-tip steak and then you make the beans to go with it. And they're a mix between a regular stewed bean and a baked bean, but not as sweet. Fabulous. One of the best things I've ever made. And I bought them from Rancho Gordo because they had them.
Very nice.
And then I looked it up online about how to do it and I did it and it was fun.
You should send me the link to Rancho Gordo. I can put it in our show notes.
I'll send you the link that very bean.
Okay.
King City pink beans are like that too. They're only grown in King City. And actually they're mentioned in East of Eden.
So Dee, you and I, we should each come up with a vegetable that can only be grown in our gardens. And it'll be our road to riches.
I wish. Yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? It's like the giant pumpkins. So you said make vegetables a part of your family heritage by growing them together and eating them.
That's true. You can pick any variety you want. And if it's like, that's the variety our family grows, that is your new heritage variety.
Blue Lake green beans. They're my husband's favorite.
Provider green beans for me.
Really good. All right. You have a quote.
I do. If it's a good book, anyone will read it. I'm totally unashamed about still reading things I loved in my childhood. J.K. Rowling. We all know who she is.
No. You don't know who she is?
I said, we all know who she is.
Oh, yeah. We all know who she is. God love her. Yeah, Harry Potter. All right. So you would like to note what you read as a child, which I laughed out loud when I read this.
So I've said this on the podcast before, and it's How to Grow Vegetables and Fruits by the Organic Method by the Rodell editors. And I used to check that book out of the library when I was a kid. I mean, like 10, 11, 12 years old. I'm checking that book out all the time.
Did you grow anything at the time or did you just enjoy?
Sure. I helped my dad garden. I was big into it.
Yeah. I read the first gardening book that I read was Theme Gardens by Barbara Damrosch.
I have that.
It was all about how you could do the different themes. And we've talked about that before. I read that in college when I was in the middle of working on really hard things. It was such a fantasy, to think about this butterfly garden or this other garden, because I was living in a dorm.
Whenever I see How to Grow Vegetables and Fruits by the Organic Method, when I see used copies for sale, if they're just a few bucks, I usually buy them, and I've occasionally given them out at talks. I have 2 on my shelf right now.
It's a great book. I like it better than the compost book by Rodell.
Yes. And then
it's too long.
I was looking on my shelves. I also have a copy of The Borrowers by Mary Norton. Mm-hmm. And, I'd like to say that that's my copy from childhood. And I was looking through it the other day and thinking that would probably be a fun read to read again for the summer. And clearly written in the book, someone wrote, "This book belongs to," and it's one of my sisters.
Uh-oh, they're going to want it back.
No, they're not. I think that they had it in a pile of books and says, "Anybody want these?" And I took it.
I read The Boxcar Children, and it was one I read over and over, that series.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yes.
The idea of living on your own and nobody telling you what to do sounds pretty good. Okay, so that brings us to our book on the bookshelf, which we both have, although I can't find my copy right now. I hope I didn't give it to Claire to sell back. It's The Heirloom Vegetable Gardening, A Master Gardener's Guide to Planting, Seed Saving, and Cultural History, which is important, by William Woys Weaver. And William Woys Weaver is a historian, a gardener, and he's a vegetable historian. He's amazing.
Unbelievable information. So we figured if we got listeners thinking about heirloom vegetables and heritage vegetables, we ought to at least send them to a book that they can read and get some more history. And, whether you get it from the library or I think the only copies I could find were on Amazon.
They were used.
Yeah.
Or something. I don't know. It was weird. We had trouble finding this one, but it's worth owning. And I think it's also one that was updated. So I think that was part of our problem too, because sometimes when they're updated, it makes them hard to find because I think Amazon gets confused about the original versus the updated version.
So my version that I've got here has a, let me see what the date is on it. And if it was the second publishing, it's from our friends at Quarto Press. Mine is from 2018, so it has got to be a newer version.
Yeah, that's the one I had too. But when I looked it up on Amazon, there was an earlier version.
Yeah, I can't find the original publication date.
It doesn't matter.
But anyway,
it's a great book
because
he knows more about vegetables than anybody on the planet. And then you also have a couple of different books about heirloom tomatoes.
Yeah, I was looking on my shelf to get my heirloom vegetable gardening. And this is a very popular topic. And I thought, man, I have 2 books on heirloom tomatoes. One is The Heirloom Tomato from Garden to Table, Recipes, Portraits, and Histories of the World's Most Beautiful Fruit by Amy Goldman. And the other one is Smith and Hawkins, 100 Heirloom Tomatoes for American Gardens by Carolyn J. Mail. And then we should give a shout out for Epic Tomatoes by our friend Craig LaHoyer. Also a great book. So anyway, and then, there's another book that I think I got it out of the library and returned it. And I'm pretty sure I don't have it now, but it's all about growing beans. And I think it's based in Kentucky, about Kentucky heritage, like green beans and stuff, I think.
And I have one on okra.
And I'm talking about that book and I'm thinking, I probably dreamed it. No, it actually exists.
I don't think so, because I have one on okra that's out of the South too. It's a little preachy is all. I'm not going to say the name of it. It's a little preachy. But it does tell you a lot about, because there are a lot of heirloom okra varieties, just like beans, anything that people can save the seeds from.
And I think I'm thinking of this book, Saving Seeds, Preserving Taste, Heirloom Seed Savers in Appalachia by Bill Best. And it came out in 2013.
I've never heard of this one.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Everything from Aura Speckled Bean. That's what I'm remembering. So this is the book I thought was about beans. It's all kinds of stuff.
Kinds of heirloom vegetables from the Appalachians.
Yeah.
Which is that area of the world. Well, that's fascinating. So, do you want to say anything else?
Well, did you notice how quickly I came up with that title? Because I have all my books cataloged now, and I just looked it up in my little database, and there it was.
I know, you're impressive.
All right. Do the quote and take us into our dirt.
To be refreshed by a morning walk or an evening saunter, to be thrilled by the stars at night, to be elated over a bird's nest or a wildflower in the spring, these are the some of the rewards of a simple life. John Burroughs. And then we're going to talk about this disgusting topic.
Well, speaking of dirt, we're going to talk about soldier fly larva compost. And, people do have like earthworm compost where they fill a bin and then the earthworms. Well, now these
are not earthworms.
These are not earthworms. A common name for them is phoenix worms, but they're soldier fly larvae. And so there was a graduate student at Purdue named Katie Terrell who did some studies and found out that the compost they produce is comparable to cow manure compost. And anyway, I don't know what to say. We'll link to the article about it. But you said you have a friend.
You wrote a ton of stuff about it.
Well, I just copied this article so I would remember stuff, but I don't really, want to go into it. She basically, got her soldier fly larva, created a bunch of compost, and then figured out that it was of a better nutritional quality than many other composting you can do at home, and help crops and things grow really well.
And chickens. People feed it to chickens. So my friend Debbie Clem, I even wrote her this morning. I said, "It's soldier fly larva, isn't it?" And she goes, "Yeah." And then I meant to ask her more, but I was busy. I was busy chasing a mouse around my house. Anyway, she has them. She has them at her house, and she has chickens.
Do you have to keep your car? You have to do this outside. You can't do it inside. Like with the worm bins, you can put it inside.
You don't want it. Mm-mm. No, because the flies are constantly reproducing and crawling up the walls and stuff. She has it outside in an area close to her chicken pen, and she could tell us all about it, and we'd love to, I'm sure, because she thinks it's the coolest thing ever. I mean, she's my friend, but I think they're gross. So that's just me. But I have a mouse that's now gone. But I get mice because I'm out in the country, so I have gross stuff too.
Yeah. So anyway,
but not on purpose.
We'll link to the article.
It does it adds fats and biomass to the chickens' diets, and she makes her own chicken feed because I don't think she believes in the chicken feed from the store.
Right.
So she does her own chicken feed, and her chicken eggs are great. I've had them. They're delicious. So it must work.
We'll leave a link and people can decide for themselves. I'm not going to do this.
No.
Okay.
I am not.
Well, I'll do a quote.
I either make compost piles or I buy compost, one of the two. I don't have creatures anymore. And I did the worm thing and I hated it.
All right. I'm going to do the next quote. For still there are so many things that I have never seen. In every wood, in every spring, there is a different green. J.R.R. Tolkien. You gave this quote to me because I like green.
Yeah, I said you had to read it because you like green. So do you want me to do my rabbit hole first?
You drug me right in after you.
It was a good one, wasn't it?
It was.
Aren't you glad? All right. So I was listening to Teresa Byington on the Rose Chat podcast, and she mentioned, because she was interviewing another lady, she mentioned that she had done a podcast episode with Peggy Martin. And anybody who grows roses knows who Peggy Martin is. Peggy Martin is actually right now, she's the vice president of the American Heritage Rose Foundation. I hope I said that right. And I actually joined them because of this rabbit hole. They try to save heritage roses, and she's the VP. But we all know her because of the Peggy Martin rose. She had a rose in her garden, and her garden was hit by Hurricane Katrina, if I remember right.
Yes.
And everything was lost in the garden. But I didn't realize, it was just such a touching podcast episode, and it was really worth listening to. Peggy is very upbeat. The way the rose came into her possession is that somebody gave it to her, and I think she had 457 roses.
She had a lot.
It was a lot. It was over 400. And she lost them all except for Peggy Martin. When she came back to her area, she had to evacuate. Her family had to evacuate. Her parents actually died in the storm.
Horrible.
And having just gone through having just gone through our fire, I know what it's like. Well, and the ice storm and Rose Rosette. I know what it's like to love plants and then have stuff happen to your garden. It's really awful. I did not ever lose my parents in a storm, but she has since, the nice thing is she relocated to another town, not so close to the ocean. And she and her husband eventually built a house together, and people started bringing her roses. And I actually started to tear up when that happened.
Well, she said she wasn't going to grow roses anymore. She was done.
I said that after Rose Rosette too, didn't
Yeah,
I?
you did.
After I lost 80 out of 100, I thought I'll never grow roses again because I won't be able to. Well, I still grow roses. In fact, I ordered two this year, today actually. But I thought it was just a beautiful, there's also a children's book that is about the Peggy Martin rose and how they sold it for, I think it was Antique Rose Emporium and another company sold starts of it with the help of Dr. I can't think of his name right now. Dr. Welch. Dr. Bill Welch helped propagate. They sold starts of Peggy Martin, which I have in my garden too. And $1 for every rose went back to restore the gardens that were just devastated by Hurricane Katrina. And what I haven't told people about my own garden is that people have been sending me things. And that's why I teared up when I read about Peggy and people just bringing her roses. I thought that because a lot of the roses she had, you couldn't just replace.
No, if you have
They were
400
antiques.
roses, you have, and she's in American Heritage Rose Foundation. But you also, when I listened to it, the other thing that struck me was that this rose was a mystery rose and nobody could identify it. And she had rose experts from literally around the world who would visit her garden.
Yeah.
And so it's not like they just took a surviving something rose and renamed it Peggy Martin. Nobody could figure out what this rose was. So
right. And she knows all the experts.
Yes.
And she's an expert.
Yes.
And so some people thought it was Seven Sisters, but I've grown both of them. No, it's not Seven Sisters. They look totally different. So it is probably an American rose, and it might be in the Noisette family, but it might not be. No one will ever know. So they call it Peggy Martin, and it actually is a great, big, huge climber, and it's almost thornless, which is really cool too.
So I am tempted because Teresa Byington, who lives on the northwest east side of Indianapolis, so she's actually zone 5B and I'm 6A. She says she has Peggy Martin in her garden, so it's also one that I think that I could probably grow. So I'm
in
tempted.
A sheltered area. I did lose mine all the way to the ground after we had that ice storm and the bad freeze that year.
Yeah.
It came back from its roots.
Well, that's the thing.
So
if it comes back from its roots, I'm good.
Yep. And in my own garden, Carefree Beauty, which is my other favorite old rose, Dr. Griffith Buck, God bless him. I started one from cuttings years ago that mirrors my other one, and it burned up in the fire. But guess what?
Coming back from the roots?
It is coming back from the roots.
Good for it. So we should mention...
So quite a rabbit hole.
Yeah. And someone wrote a children's book about the Peggy Martin rose that talks about the hurricane. Right. And so I have ordered that for my great nephew, who's only a year old. So he's far too young for the book. But I'm going to send it at some point anyway and say, if you're going to raise a kid in New Orleans, which is where he's at, I think he needs this book.
I think he does too. So tell me about your rabbit hole.
Well, my rabbit hole isn't quite as deep. I'll just give you a hint and then we can move on. Viola Brainerd Baird was the daughter of Middlebury College president and North American violet expert Ezra Brainerd, who documented some of her father's work for the botanical community.
Another lost lady.
And she is...
And her name's Viola.
Because her dad was
was a violet expert.
Exactly. You got it.
I like it. It's about like me and my rose stuff.
Except you didn't name your daughter's Rose or anything.
And my mother's name was Rose. That's why I didn't name one of my daughters Rose, because my mother didn't like her name, which is sad.
That is sad.
I should have named one of them. I should have named Claire Rose, but I didn't. Oh, well.
Let's do our garden commissions. You go first.
All right. We fixed the fence around the garden. That was a huge step.
Yay.
Huge step, because now I can replant all of my replacements for the Japanese maple that died. I'm planting a Sango Kaku back in there, which is a coral bark. 2 hydrangea arborescens, which they're listed as giant ball on the outside. And I know they're arborescens by the leaf shape. There is no giant ball in any catalogs online. So I need to ask Bob Scott who knows what their name is really. He may just call them that. That might be a colloquial thing Bob calls them. For all I know, they're incredible.
That may
Who
be what
knows?
people come and asking for. What's that one? It's got those giant
One
balls
with the
of
giant
white flowers.
ball.
Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah.
So I'm actually planting those so that I'll have a color echo for the Annabelles, on the other side.
Yeah.
And I'm planting the Sango Kako because that was the original Japanese maple that was in there from years ago. I'm doing it with my glass, my glass leaves. They mimic it. So color echoes. All right. And then what else? 3 Southern Comfort heucheras, which is the best heuchera in our part of the world. If you can find it, Bob has it at his place. A holly that was sent to me by the wonderful people at Southern Living, and a St. John's wort.
The holly,
butterfly
the
bush.
holly was one of those straight up and down pencil shapes.
Yeah, I'm going to put it where the Nandina was.
Okay.
Because it'll be a nice evergreen vertical element.
Because before the fire, you didn't know where you were going to plant that. And so the fire, I guess if there's a bright side, we have new areas to plant in.
Yeah, we have several new areas to plant in. So the good news is that's all ready to go in. And actually, after we're done recording our second episode today, I will go outside and work on it.
And I am, this week, it's going to be cool all week. Highs in the 60s, lows in the 40s, dipping into the high 30s. So I'm just going to be weeding, cleaning up, doing some mowing, tending seedlings, stuff like that. Nothing too exciting.
So. It's going to rain here. It's going to rain here a lot. And it's going to be raining when this podcast comes out. So, if you can, go out and get your irises that are just starting to bloom so they don't get... You can be sure we're going to get rain when the irises bloom here. It's one of my objections to them.
Oh, and so that's generally good advice. If you're going to have a big rainstorm, run out to the garden, pick some beautiful flowers to enjoy indoors. It'll make you happier on a cloudy day. And with that, we want to say thank you for listening to The Garden Angelist. I hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
If you listen to Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review that helps us get noticed by others. Could you also share our podcast with your friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
And subscribe to our Substack newsletter, The Garden Angelist, at substack.com. It's also linked to in our show notes, and it's free.
And if you want to help support us, use those affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we're in a small commission and it costs you nothing. Or you can make a monthly subscription through Buzzsprout or a one-time donation through PayPal.
And several people have. We want to thank them
very much.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the garden gate. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.